Heyo, welcome back. Welcome into the Undrafted and Unqualified Fantasy Football Podcast. I know it's looking a little different today. I'm here, Anthony's here in the screen. I don't know how you're seeing it, and then we got Vinny here as well. But yeah, we'll be in this Zoom format for the summer. I know we took a week off, but thanks for bearing with us. We'll be back weekly for the time being, and soon enough we'll be getting into twice a week as we get closer to the draft season. Um, so yeah, we got a fun episode planned today.
What's up, everybody? Yeah, today we're going to get into some start bench cuts at each position. We have one at each position. Then also as a little throw in, just as we were kind of going through um, the Fantasy Pros average draft position rankings, we kind of thought it would be a good idea because we were just doing it together and we were surprised at some of the names we were seeing, low, high. And so we thought it would be good to pick out one player at each position that kind of surprised us based on their ADP right now. I also think it's important to mention that this ADP that we're using is changing by the day. So these are the kind of rankings that are based off of, average fantasy players mock drafts on Fantasy Pro. So it is kind of, very close to the real life of what you could see in a draft right now. And obviously things are going to change once we get to draft season. But yeah, it's a good marker. And so yeah, we're going to get into some start bench cuts. Should we just get right into it?
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to point out too, is that ADP is going to be pretty accurate, right? Because it is daily, it's updated daily. So yeah, we'll start off with the quarterback position. So we drop down a little bit outside of the top 10. We're doing the quarterback 15, Jordan Love, the quarterback 16, Dak Prescott, and the quarterback 18, CJ Stroud. So we picked these three because we think they're low, right? They were all ranked very highly going into last year. They were all top 10, and now they've dropped a little bit after having a down year. We know Dak got hurt as well. So pretty interesting to see where they're falling now. All of them 15 or lower. So
Mhm.
Vinny, if you want to start off, where are you going with this one?
Yeah. No, I mean, I know we said we're gonna get to our guy of like none of these guys are the big surprise of ADP, by the way, but
Mhm.
I mean, this is just a huge some of these names that we're seeing here in these middle of the pack QBs are crazy to me. But to just answer the start bench cut, right off the bat, I think I'm gonna start Dak Prescott. This is a guy that has multiple QB1 seasons very recently. He has CD Lamb, of course, just got George Pickens, but the big thing with him is being able to stay healthy. And he wasn't able to do that last year. So I think this is kind of the, you know, this is because of that injury that people kind of forgot what Dak Prescott is capable of. And compared with, the likes of Jordan Love and CJ Stroud, I just really believe in the potential and obviously the history of what Dak's shown us he can do. And getting this weapon of George Pickens is just super exciting to kind of line up along with CD Lamb and make that just offense as a whole better. So yeah, I'm going to start Dak. And the bench is a tough one for me. Obviously, I said in past episodes I'm a Packers fan,
Mhm.
but I think for the purposes of this scenario, I'm gonna have to bench CJ Stroud. I think that's another situation where um, people are kind of forgetting that he had a very good rookie season. And obviously his sophomore season, he had a big slump. I think a lot to blame with that is his wide receiver room moved a lot around a lot. He didn't have Diggs for a good part of the season. He didn't have Nico for he had him for beginning of the season, basically out most of the middle of the season, then came back later in the year. And then Tank Dell obviously was kind of there for most of the season, then got hurt towards the end. And so everything was just moving around and obviously gets Nico back, but then they draft two guys in the second and third round, or third and fourth, one of those two. And so they fired their offensive coordinator. It's a new guy in there. Don't know the name of the offensive coordinator that they went with, but I just think it's a great opportunity for CJ Stroud to have a bounce back year. And we know the Texans are going to be competitive. They've made the playoffs both of the last 2 years. And so I just like the situation more. Not more than Jordan Love, but I just like the prospects of CJ Stroud kind of bouncing back and getting giving you more value than Jordan Love might. And I think Jordan Love kind of is what he is. Unfortunately, that sucks to say as
Mhm.
a Packers fan, but that offense is kind of built to win football games and not win you fantasy football games, fantasy football weeks. So that's kind of my first thoughts on those three, at least. So what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I was looking at my phone for a little there because I was looking up the Dak injury.
Hmm.
It was a torn hamstring, so I forgot that's what it was. It was a hamstring, and I remember hearing he was coming back and rehabbing pretty well.
Hmm.
Um, I think I agree with you. I'd start Dak. Dak, yeah, he's been a QB1. He's been underrated, in my opinion, for fantasy football. And none of these guys are rushing quarterbacks. And Dak Prescott, out of these three, I think has the best weapons around him. He's got CeeDee Lamb, who's a top three, arguably, receiver in the league.
Yep.
Then you have now George Pickens, who they say in that organization. I mean, we know what that organization is. They loved who was it? Jonathan Mingo. They traded a fourth for Mingo.
He's
They
running the
bring him
table.
in and he doesn't play.
Yeah.
So, we know they talk a lot, but they say that Pickens is a wide receiver one to them. And
Yeah.
we saw it last year. He was that in Pittsburgh. So I think even if he is the two and he is the complement to CeeDee Lamb, I think he's a very good player, and I think he makes that receiver room quite like enticing to have Dak Prescott.
Hmm.
And then we know Jake Ferguson is there too at the tight end, who's a very competent player. So
Yep.
I think I would agree with you. I'm starting Dak. I think the difference is it's an easy cut for me for Stroud. I was going back and forth a little bit between Dak and Love actually on who I'm going to start, but I think I do like the situation for Dak better. But I'm cutting Stroud, and the reason I'm cutting Stroud, I agree with the bounce back potential. But he had a horrible line last year, and that did not help him. They traded away their best offensive lineman and another guard and said, "Oh, even though we were a really bad line, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna get rid of some of these guys." And
Yeah.
then you're like, okay, what are they gonna do? What are they gonna do during the draft? Who are they gonna pick up? And they didn't do much. And they had to retool that receiver room completely, right? Nico Collins is there. He's still the alpha, but Diggs is not there. Diggs is now a New England Patriot. You have Tank Dell, who people are saying it could be career ending, which is really sad to hear, but you can know for sure he's not playing this year unless they make a really late run and somehow he comes back. But this is his second time tearing his ACL. So I think with two rookies in there alongside Nico Collins and a horrible offensive line, I don't like it. And Mixon's going to vulture some of those touchdowns away. Same with how Jacobs is going to do that to Love. But
Hmm.
I think the Packers, I trust LaFleur a lot better to coach that team. They brought in Matthew Golden. They have Jaden Reed there, who I still like as a NFL wide receiver, not necessarily for fantasy, but I think it's for me, it's going to be Dak. I'm starting. I'm benching Jordan Love, and I'm cutting CJ Stroud.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good point. I was back and forth about Stroud and Love. And also, by the way, I did just look up the offensive coordinator for the Texans, and it is a Sean McVay guy. It was the Rams
Okay.
passing game coordinator. So
Mm,
that's always a good sign to have someone under Sean McVay
yeah.
kind of be running your offense. But of course, it's his name is let me his name is Nick Caley. So
Yep. The tight end
no,
coach. The tight
but
end coach over there.
okay, there you go. But yeah, I think it just goes back to my point of the Packers, after watching them a lot, Jordan Love is rarely going to throw, 350-yard games with four
Mhm.
touchdowns. They're built to win games. And I think Jordan Love's kind of adapted that playing style. You could see it last year. So, from a pure fantasy perspective, um, yeah, I don't know. It's a throw up, but right now I'm going to say Stroud. But I
Yeah.
like your points about the offensive line. That's a big deal. That's a big switch up. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting though, because I'm just looking here again at the ADPs. Jordan Love is ranked the highest, and neither one of us started him.
it's interesting. Yeah.
So that is interesting. Stroud is the lowest too. So if you're gonna bench Love, Love's the highest. You're cutting him. I mean, and
Hmm.
then Yeah, so Stroud's the lowest. So those three are really interesting. I think when it comes draft time, QB in two QB leagues, super flex leagues, um,
Dak,
that's going to be these three are going to be pretty enticing late round guys.
yeah, Dak's a steal right now in my mind. I mean, if we
Mhm.
were drafting today for if the season started tomorrow and these were the rankings, I'm getting Dak in every league towards the
Yeah,
end of the
I'm
draft.
drafting him
So
last. Yeah.
but that's my takeaway is that he's criminally underrated right now, and
Mhm.
hopefully no one catches on to that.
Yep.
Besides the listeners of the podcast, of course.
Yep. Yep. There are a few guys ahead of him, such as Brock Purdy.
Mhm.
Jared Goff is way ahead of him. There's Justin Herbert. Caleb Williams is ahead of him right now. And then let's just hop into it. The guy we want to talk about today, the one where what do we make of this guy, is
Yeah.
the current QB 12, Justin Fields.
Wow.
So this guy was starting for the Steelers last year, and then Russell Wilson comes back from injury and takes over and starts the rest of the year. Now Justin Fields goes to the New York Jets. He's going to be the clear starter there, and he's being drafted as a QB1. So, Vinny, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I feel very strongly about my take on this, and I'll just say it outright. I don't like Justin Fields at all. I think the guys we just talked about, I would easily take over him. The ones we just did keep trade or start bench cut with, I would easily take over Justin Fields. And I haven't even looked at the list, but I'm not taking Justin Fields in any league, let alone QB 12. I don't know what his average pick is and where, I don't know if we can see that, but that's crazy to me. I think the Jets are a team that you don't go to rejuvenate your career. That's where your career goes to die as a
Yeah.
quarterback. And that scares me. I mean, maybe if there was a team with a competent coaching staff, one that like has developed QBs in the past, worked well, like, for example, Sam Darnold going to the Vikings, like that
Mhm.
just kind of made sense that it could work out. I don't think anyone predicted what would happen, but I just think all things considered, I think obviously people are drafting him at that spot right now because of the rushing upside. And of course, that's enticing for fantasy football. But I just see this going nothing but bad, nothing but bad things happening with Justin Fields, just mainly because of the situation. And I just can't see a world where this works out and he turns into this elite asset. So that's kind of my feelings. I'm very surprised that he was that high. Um, I don't even think he would be in my top 20, to be honest.
Wow.
I
Wow.
get the rushing upside, but for me, I just think his poor play and poor accuracy is gonna be too much of a bright spot, or not a bright spot, just like something too much of a bad characteristic for him that
Mm.
it'll be too obvious and that he won't be the starting quarterback by the end of this season for the Jets.
Okay. Wow. Um, to first support you on this, I think I talked about it a little bit last week in our hot takes episode,
Hmm.
where I don't think any tight ends are going to finish, right? I talked about it with Mason Taylor and how the offensive line, Justin Fields takes forever to throw the ball and the offensive line doesn't hold up when that's the case. I think that could be an issue for the team and the offense as a whole.
Hmm.
On the other side of that, if pass rushers are getting to him, what's he doing? He's scrambling or throwing checkdowns. So I think for fantasy, I actually think this is an okay spot. I think QB 12 is about where I would consider him. The rushing upside's insane. When he was in
Yeah.
Chicago, he was a QB1. And I think we're quick to write him off because they traded him for Caleb Williams, and Caleb Williams didn't prove to be this amazing quarterback there in Chicago yet. We're hoping for the
Hmm.
jump, but he went to Pittsburgh last year, and I thought he was actually very serviceable QB there, and even for fantasy, he had some good weeks. And so I think I agree. The Jets are a place careers go to die. The Jets are not a good football franchise, but you know, I think there's an opportunity here. Garrett Wilson's there and Brees Hall is still there. And hopefully Alan Lazard is a okay enough receiver for them, or one of the young guys like Malachi Corley can step up, or Arian Smith, the rookie they drafted this year. But yeah, I think I've seen him going higher because of that rushing upside. I actually think QB 12 is a pretty good spot for him.
I think my passion for not liking it also falls on the fact that I'm just not convinced he's gonna hold this job long enough to finish
Mhm.
at that spot. You know what I mean? That like if
Well,
the Jets start,
who's taking over?
I think that they could just go into full on tank and like go get their quarterback of the future. And like I don't think Justin Fields is bad enough to really tank with, but I also don't think
Mhm.
he's good enough to win with, if that makes sense. So like they'll
Yeah,
fall into an in between where like this guy's no longer on the team because he gives you a chance, but you're not going to win anything with him. So then that I was just looking at the board of ADP, and I mean we're talking about rushing upside, and a guy that like it's they said he's the starter. I don't nothing's official yet, but he's most likely going to be the starter. Um, Anthony Richardson could be 23 with that kind of big time rushing upside that everyone dreams of. He hasn't shown it fully like Justin Fields has in the past, but is there really that big of a difference of like the guy you could get undrafted and could potentially start, like, and then guy you take within the first 6, 7 rounds? You know what I mean? I think that's my problem with
yeah. The difference is that Fields is the only quarterback in New York, and they brought him
that.
in to be the starter. There's Daniel Jones could
Damn it. Yeah.
outright win the job, and we're not going to see Anthony Richardson again. And he's also horrible. His passing percentage is like he completes like in the 50% of his passes. So
I would be
Fields is a
curious.
much better quarterback than Anthony Richardson, in my opinion, and it's his job there too.
Yeah, no, that's fair. But I would just be curious to really dive into this is future episode, maybe when we get close to the
Yeah.
season, Fields is definitely the guy. But I'd just be curious to see his stats compared to guys like Anthony Richardson, who have kind of been written off in
Mhm.
terms of like passing accuracy. Because I know Justin Fields is not that guy in terms of accuracy either,
Mhm.
but maybe it's just not as gruesome as Anthony Richardson's numbers were last year in terms of that. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
I'm interested to see. I hope I'm not wrong about him, but
I'd be
just
curious to
something to
see
look
where
into.
he ended to his couple years in Chicago. How high? Part of me says he finished at like QB 6, which to
I
me
have
then
seen that
we're
exact same number. Yeah,
oh really?
I think he
So
did. Yeah,
okay, so if he finished at QB 6, then let's say he finished at QB 6, then we're saying he's in a worse situation now, which I don't think is too much worse than the Bears when he was there. And this Jets team, it's a rebuilding offensive line. It's actually not horrible, even though the stats were not good last year. They might be improved this year. And then, Garrett Wilson's there. So it's not the worst situation. I definitely think it's worse, but it's almost baked in that, QB 12, it's a dip for him, and people aren't drafting him at his ceiling or where he could really finish.
yeah. No, I definitely see the upside. I just also see the
Yeah.
NYJ next to his name, and I'm
Yeah.
out. Like that's just
Yeah.
too, but that's enough for me to be out on a guy. So yeah,
Yeah.
but I see what you mean.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, that's a great first one to talk about what to make of this guy. Let's hop into the
Yeah.
running backs though. Start, bench, cut. We'll go from there. So we're gonna do the RB 9, 10, and 11. We have Josh Jacobs, Chase Brown, and Jonathan Taylor. What do you got?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Because once again, I think Jonathan Taylor's a surprising name to kind of see at RB11. This is kind of guy that's been a consensus top five RB these past few years, even longer, like since he's kind of been a rookie after his rookie year when he kind of
Mm.
exploded. So it's interesting to see him here with these names, but I think I'm gonna have to start Josh Jacobs. I think the Packers have kind of really committed to uh run heavy offense, really mix in play action and really rely on the run to kind of facilitate their offense. And they showed that last year with Josh Jacobs, putting up the numbers he did in terms of touchdowns, touches, yards. Um, and I see that continuing. I know the Packers went Matthew Golden, which could make someone think, oh, they want to get back to the Aaron Rodgers pass happy offense. But I don't think that that's what they do. And I think Josh Jacobs has another really good year. And their offensive line is about the same it was last year. They're getting healthier with Elgton Jenkins coming back, pretty elite offensive guard, moves all around the line. But yeah, I really like Josh Jacobs' just situation, and I think it's a similar one to last year, and I think he continues with that. I want to bench Jonathan Taylor. I think this is kind of in the realms of a Dak Prescott that we just talked about in terms of a guy that's kind of going to be slept on in a lot of drafts. I I don't remember his finish to this past year. I know it's not as bad as people think. I think he was a top 10 running
I
back. I
I think
could
so too. I want to
I
say it was around 9.
So, I mean, I guess this ranking makes sense for him as ADP, but like we just talked about, I think what really helps him is if Daniel Jones is the quarterback. If Daniel
Mhm.
Jones is the quarterback, I think that helps Jonathan Taylor a lot, and he's a guy that I would really want to get in a lot of leagues if Daniel Jones is the quarterback. That's because Daniel Jones has that rushing upside. Of course, he kind of showed it on the Giants, but it's not that what you draft him for, like or well, not draft him for at all, but not Daniel Jones. But in terms of Anthony Richardson, that's kind of his whole game that he's stealing touchdowns. He's the goal line guy where he'll just shove it in. He'll take off for a little gain. He doesn't really dump it off much. I think if they decide to go Daniel Jones, I think that kind of shows the path of the offense that they really want to involve Jonathan Taylor a lot more. And even with Anthony Richardson, I think he can have enough value to kind of live up to that where he's at right now and even better. So I like to bench Jonathan Taylor. Um, Chase Brown, I'm gonna have to cut. It's not that I think it's important to point out that this doesn't mean we would cut Chase Brown in any leagues or any
Yeah.
people that we're cutting. It's just kind of for the sake of the game. But out of these three, I would cut Chase Brown. He has kind of that all around upside of being a three down running back, being able to catch passes in an elite offense. I just don't know if they don't really have anyone else there, but we've just seen too many late round running backs kind of fizzle out and lose trust from their team and coaching staff. I can't say that's what's going to happen to Chase Brown. I just think based on the circumstances of these other guys that we were talking about in this scenario, um, I'm gonna have to cut Chase Brown just because I like the value of Jacobs and Taylor more.
Mhm. I'm gonna agree with you completely on all three. I'm starting
Yeah.
Jacobs, I'm benching Taylor, and I'm cutting Brown. Let me say though, I like all three a lot. I like all three a lot where they are. And I actually think Chase Brown has the highest upside. I think the Bengals are by far the best offense. I think the Packers are a great offense too, don't get me wrong, but that Bengals offense is top one probably. Like
Yeah.
it's just their defense is terrible. So I think Chase Brown's going to get a lot of volume and a lot of opportunities. The reason I'm cutting him is they had a lot of top 30 visits for running backs. And I know they don't want him to be the three down back. Zach Moss, they re-signed him. Like they wanted him back. I want to say there's somebody else there now too. Nobody that's going to be like taken away too much. But I want to say there is also somebody else that's just, depth. If they choose, oh, Chase Brown's not going to be the three down back. Um, I still like him a lot at RB10. I think he's great value, but I think for that reason, like the hesitancy of, maybe they go back to Zach Moss and they do a split, like that just makes me hesitate there. I also think then when comparing Jacobs and Taylor, I think Jacobs is just right now a better running back. I think he has a better offensive line. I think he has a better offense as a whole. I think he's going to score more touchdowns. He scored a lot last year, and it took him a little bit to get going with the touchdowns. But once he started scoring, it started looking good for him, and he had a
Mhm.
great finish to the season. And then, Taylor, that offensive line lost two guys, at least two, but they lost. Um, I want to say it was their center and Will Fries. They lost both of them
Okay.
to Minnesota. They both went to Minnesota, and I know that because I remember there were two guys from that line who specifically left and went to Minnesota. So I
Mhm.
know that offensive line isn't what it used to be. I remember 6, 7 years ago, it's like, oh, this is the best O line in the league.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not that. I'm kind of thinking bottom 10 now. So I just think the situation for Jacobs is better, and that's why I'd prefer him. So yeah, ADP stands RB9, the highest one. We both have Jacobs, and we both choose him to start. And then Taylor, a little bit of a value there at RB11.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I guess let's talk about just because we both agreed. Let's move on.
Mhm.
I think the interesting one here, what to make of this guy, is Christian McCaffrey. He
Yeah.
is currently the RB6, but his average draft spot, well, I made sure to write this down because I think this is more important than RB6 for this specifically, is
Mhm.
that he's going in the second round at pick 3 in a standard 12-team league.
Yeah.
So he's going outside the first round, early second round. Christian McCaffrey, the guy who's been the RB1 numerous times, who's had an 1,000-yard receiving season.
Yeah.
So I think it's, this guy, we know what he can be, and it's just the injuries. And it's just there's risk baked into it, but I don't know. I think RB6, I think round two, pick 3 is really low. I think I'd be considering him. I don't know how the draft's gonna fall, but I probably want Jamar Chase, Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, but I may be going Christian McCaffrey as high as pick 4. For like off the top of my head, I think there's so much value there, and it's still a good team, even without Debo Samuel, even with
Mhm.
Ayuk not being as great. Like we saw Juwan Jennings be amazing last year, and now Ricky Pearsall, he was good. He got shot last year. Like the dude missed time because he got shot and was still decent. He was a first round receiver. I think he's gonna come in and like be a big piece alongside Juwan Jennings. Kittle is there. That offensive line's still good. They just paid Purdy a ton. It's still Kyle Shanahan.
Yep.
And to add to that, they have the single easiest schedule this year. So I think Christian McCaffrey right now is a value. I think he's every bit worth the risk. Hey, if you can get him at the 203, even better, take him there. But
Yeah.
that means then you're pick 10 in the first round and you're bypassing him there. I don't know. I'd go pretty high on McCaffrey. I'm in on McCaffrey this year, and I think he's a huge value in drafts right now.
No, yeah. I mean, I appreciate you laying out, McCaffrey's situation, but honestly, you could say he just got drafted or just got traded to the Cleveland Browns, and I would take him in every league. But I think the
Yeah.
biggest thing is his injuries. And obviously that's kind of been the, sore thumb to his career so far this year, or so far to this point. And um it's a really tough one because we know what he's capable of, but he's also such an easy guy to pass on and be like, "I don't wanna deal with that worry this year." Like, give me someone that has shown to be healthy, and that's what a lot of people I feel like have been doing to this point now. I mean, people are kinda fed up with last year, he wasn't on an injury report until right before week 1. People
Yeah.
are taking him at the 101, and then they get burned for the whole year. And so I think he's on a lot of people's do not draft list. I think this is kinda why we've seen this little dip. But I am with you that at this point, it's kind of a value that, that at this point last year, he was the 101 kind of no-brainer after
Mhm.
coming off his year before. But now, I mean, I'm looking at the ADP. Gentry's at kind of that back end of the first round. If you can get Gentry and McCaffrey as your 2 running back at, like, the back end of
Oh
the first
man.
round, I mean, you're already asking for your league mates' Venmos. Like, I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
it's crazy, but I think it is a situation where I'm willing to take the get burned on an injury if I know I can get a legitimate first round pick that, doesn't have that injury history. So if I can get someone that's like a legitimate, like a Genty, that you can't call him legitimate yet, but he's as sure a thing since Saquon Barkley's rookie year that we can kind of feel confident about that he's going to have a good year. So I agree that I'm in on him because it is to the point where I'm willing to kind of get burned on a second round pick that has the upside to be the number one overall fantasy player if all things go right.
Mhm. Yeah, I said I'd go as high as pick four. I think the only tough part is then say you do get burned. Well, then
Mhm.
your second best player is back end of the second. Whereas
Exactly.
if you take say at the 110 and you come around at the 203 and take somebody else like a Nico Collins, for example, well, you still have a stud who could have been a first round pick
Mm.
back end of the first. So I think if you can find a way to get him on your team in the back end of the first, I think you're in a better situation if you do get burned to work with the risk. But I think he's every bit worth the risk. And like you said, he was the 101 last year.
Yeah.
So, we're looking at a guy who could be special. It's just the risk. We've seen it before with him too. He misses
Yeah,
a whole year. So we know there's risk baked in, but he's one of those players where it's really fun if it hits too.
exactly. But I think to your point though, I think at this point I wouldn't be in on him if I'm in the top six picks. But
Mhm.
after that range, I think it's worth the shot, worth the kind of home run, and kind of just make sure you have a good draft to kind of prepare for that inevitable, hopefully not, but injury that has happened these past couple years. So, but it's definitely kind of that one that you could win a league in the back end of the first, second round or first early second round. So, yeah, he's definitely kind of like a interesting one to follow how that ADP kind of shifts as we find out more about his health towards the start of the year.
Yeah, I think it's real interesting. Like, even think about the RB one or two, whatever he is right now, Bijan
Mhm.
Robinson. He's got like he's been pretty consistent at around 17 PPR points a game, right? So do you take him at the 102 or do you go Christian McCaffrey who could have 22 points a game? Like
And he's
so
done it. He's done it before
yeah,
too. Yeah.
exactly. It's just one of
So,
those situations. Do you want the comfortable guy or do you want the risk? And
yeah,
it's a decision you're just gonna have to make in your own drafts.
exactly. But yeah, definitely an interesting one.
Mhm. Let's go over to wide receiver. Wide receiver 6, 7, and 8. This is a really interesting one. It's Malik Neighbors, Nico Collins, and Brian Thomas Jr. So all three of these guys are studs, and
Mhm.
we know they can be unbelievable players. I think to start it off, I'm just really in on Malik Neighbors as a prospect. And I think he's got a quarterback upgrade, and I think that's going to be huge for him. I don't care who it is, whoever
Yeah.
it is, it's an upgrade. It's not Tommy DeVito anymore or
Yeah. Yep.
Daniel Jones. So,
Yep.
I'm in on him, and we saw him actually produce a lot with Daniel Jones for the early part of the year. So
Hmm.
I think he should. People compare him. He's like Jamar Chase light. I think that's pretty accurate. He's that type of player. He's a really, really special player. So
Hmm.
I'm in on Neighbors. I think Neighbors is going to have an amazing year too, and he's going to be really good and hopefully score more touchdowns with that offense improving.
Yep.
The other two, it's a tough. Nico Collins or Brian Thomas. I'm probably going Brian Thomas just because he's younger. He can take a step forward after finishing at wide receiver 4 last year. So,
Easy.
it's crazy
Yeah.
to think about, but Trevor Lawrence is there. Travis Hunter's actually going to take some weight off of him because people are going to worry about him too. It's not like, oh, this is the only guy here. I think Liam Cohen being there as the head coach to an offensive minded guy. Brian Thomas is exciting. We saw him perform better with Mac Jones. That's the only thing where I'm like, maybe he's not going to be as amazing, but he was still really, really good. And
Yep.
he's another guy who's just an elite receiver.
Hmm.
So I think that's probably what I'd do. I love Nico too. I would be all in on Nico as well. And it's just a situation that I don't know what that offense is going to be. I think the Texans are going to compete, and they're probably going to win the division. It's not a very good division there, the AFC South, but I don't know. I'm a little worried about that team as a whole. And Joe Mixon's still there. Maybe they run the ball more. So we don't know what they're gonna do yet, and so I think that's the reason. I'd just rather take the younger guys. Nico Collins is pretty young too, but I'd rather take the younger guys going into year two who are in improved situations who could really take that jump, even though they already are really good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with the start. Malik Neighbors, love him. I
Mhm.
think to even go further than what you were saying, I think this guy just has wide receiver one overall potential in all of
Wow.
fantasy. I agree completely that his QB situation got a lot better. I mean, if Jameis gets in there, he this guy is putting this guy's gonna have 200 yards a game and like 10, 15
Mhm.
catches. I'm exaggerating, but like he just has that potential to just take over games and just demand the ball. And that's what you want in a fantasy
Yeah,
receiver. You want a guy that you can watch a game and be like, I know I'm going to watch this guy score some points. And he's that guy. I mean, in terms like Jamar Chase is the perfect comparison because he has that same ability, obviously being the wide receiver one overall last year. But I really love Malik Neighbors. And so that was an easy start for me like you were just saying, it does kind of get difficult for me with the bench and cut. I think I'm gonna go the opposite and go Nico Collins as my bench, just because of the fact that when he seems to just be Stroud's guy. I mean, that
mhm.
seems to be very clear that we got. I think a lot of people forget that Nico Collins was a bust his first 2 years. I mean, this guy was kind of
Yeah,
a nobody, and putting up I mean, to be fair, he had a horrible quarterback situation, but right when Stroud came in, he's turned into this elite top 10 receiver that everyone
yeah,
talks about having on their fantasy teams. And I don't think that's for that. I think that should be like, talked about a little more of that. When he plays with CJ Stroud, these guys go nuclear. I think like first game last season, Nico had 2 touchdowns, then he got hurt, I think. And then he was out for that
something like
time
that.
being first play back, he rips a 75-yard touchdown with Stroud. So that connection is like without a doubt there. And I think that's the difference with Brian Thomas for me is that, like you mentioned, he played a lot of his season with Mac Jones and had success, which is a great sign for Brian Thomas. But it does kind of make me curious of it wasn't that same success with Trevor Lawrence, which is interesting. Like obviously Trevor Lawrence is this was an elite prospect and is still kind of figuring things out. And Mac Jones is just abysmal. So like it's just weird
Yeah,
how that kind of when you think about that, it's like, shouldn't we be more excited about him having Trevor Lawrence? Well, the sample size with those two, it wasn't necessarily elite like you see with Nico Collins. So I think just for that reason, I really like Brian Thomas Jr. But I think I just need to see it be done with Trevor Lawrence at the same level that he was doing it before. And they kind of just weren't like, letting Mac Jones throw whatever he wants and just who cares. But you know what I mean? And so then also the fact of Travis Hunter gonna be primarily offense, playing receiver. So I think those two factors just there's a lot more security with Nico Collins where he's the guy and CJ Stroud's going to get him the ball. So I that excites me a little more in terms of fantasy production, but it's close.
mhm,
I still love BTJ, but just a little not concerned, but just interested to see how things develop with Trevor at quarterback.
mhm. Yeah, I think these two you could go either way. You almost got me swaying to the other way where I'm gonna bench bench
Yeah,
Nico.
it's a tough one. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think Nico though, just another piece before he broke out, I remember hearing that it's like, oh no, like this guy's a really talented receiver. He's
Mhm.
gonna be something special. And then Stroud comes in and he's got a quarterback, and all of a sudden he's a dog. He's an alpha.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's like, all right, this guy's legit too. But yeah, I think those two you can go either way. I guess we're both high on Malik Neighbors. That'll be fun to talk about more too.
yeah.
The receiver we we're a little bit like, all right, what do we make of this guy? It's Tyreek Hill, wide receiver 13. So I think this is a really interesting one,
It
right?
is.
Tyreek Hill, just prior to this past season, he was the wide receiver one overall. And this past season, he ended I don't even know. I think it was like wide receiver 18, 19, something like that. He ended outside the top 12, and now he's being drafted there. He's being drafted at the wide receiver 13. So, it's kind of like it's almost baked in. People are like, all right, he's done. I think honestly, I think 13's a little high. But
Really?
that's how I feel personally. I know the player Tyreek Hill is, but I saw him on a stream today with Sketch. He's out golfing. He's out golfing
Yeah.
in a golf
Yeah.
course. Like he's just enjoying life. I really think it's just he's hitting the age too where it's hard to come back from that. I
Hmm.
don't think Tyreek Hill is going to be a complete bust. I don't think if you take him at wide receiver 13 that you're going to whiff on that pick. I don't think I really want him this year. I'd rather take guys with more upside. I think we may have seen his peak and it's either going to stay there or it's going to keep dropping. And I'm thinking more wide receiver 16 range might be a little bit
Hmm.
better in my opinion. I don't know. I'm out on Tyreek Hill and I could get burned, but I'll get
Yeah.
burned then, I guess.
I honestly, this one was tough for me where I at first when we were looking at those rankings, I was like, wow, like that seems like a value, but I do kind of agree with you where like in a lot of fantasy, like with receivers especially, I feel like the shelf life of these guys to be elite and be in that top five is very short. Like a name I kind of think of when we're talking about Tyreek Hill in this kind of situation he's in right now is Cooper Cup. Like Cooper Cup had this outstanding year where
Mhm,
broke only he had won the triple crown for receiver, like reception yards, touchdowns, just outrageous numbers. Then he's going next year in kind of the top five picks. Some people are taking him at the 101. And then he just kind of never got back to that form. Obviously, injuries are a thing for him, but with Tyreek Hill, it kind of reminds me of that, where it's just like he put up this outrageous season where he's won you fantasy leagues, and then you kind of have to pick him that high just because of that fact that this guy just put up outrageous numbers. Maybe he just never gets back to that point, like you said. And I think that's a real conversation that people need to have about him. And obviously, you mentioned of the character issues. That's been a problem for him. So uh, yeah, but also you can't deny that when Tua is out there healthy and on the field,
mhm,
Tyreek has that upside. So I agree. I think it's a thing where he's at the right spot, but he also could be a smash at that spot. Like if at 13,
mhm.
if hey, he could still be a wide receiver, top five wide receiver if he Tua stays healthy, he stays out of trouble. Like it's definitely a realm in the realm of possibility. So it's one that I don't think he's as talented as those other top five guys. He's not a polished route runner. He's a good route runner, but he's not in the likes of like CD Lamb, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. Um, he obviously speed is his main gift that he uses on the football field. So I don't know. It's definitely an interesting one where like I think I would dabble with some shares of Tyreek Hill at the right spot and right time based on my needs for my team, but it's not necessarily someone that I'm like, whoa, like Tyreek Hill, wide receiver 13. Like I need to go grab him in every league. Like it's not like that. So I think we're kind of in agreement of like where we stand on him for the most part.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's get to these last ones. The last start bench cut. We got tight ends 3, 4, and 5. George Kittle, TJ Hawkinson, and Sam Laporta. What do you got?
All right, yeah. I think I'm gonna go. I really like Kittle, and I really want to say start him, and I think I'm going to. I just sort of worry if last year was a little bit of an outlier in terms of what we should expect from him. I mean, we did kind of go down that offense of still has a lot of people mouths to feed there. A fully healthy McCaffrey is a big mouth to feed in terms of just touches that he's going to get. And obviously Kittle just had an outrageous year last year in terms of like just putting up points. I mean, I don't know.
Mhm.
Obviously, Brock Bowers had that a crazy year, so he wasn't the tight end one, but um, I think just with this group of players, I'm gonna have to say start Kittle. But I do like TJ Hawkinson a lot, and that's going to be my bench. I like TJ Hawkinson. I think with a rookie quarterback in JJ McCarthy, that seems to be the position that a lot of rookie quarterbacks like to rely on. Obviously, Justin Jefferson there, and that's someone who he's definitely going to rely on. But that kind of underneath kind of safety blanket that TJ Hawkinson has kind of showed the ability to just dominate at and just get himself open, rack up catches, and also be somewhat of a red zone threat. I think his touchdown numbers haven't been elite, but he's still very capable of that. And just Kevin O'Connell in that offense, I really like the potential for TJ Hawkinson. So that's my bench. And then Laporta, he's an interesting one where he could just have another nuclear year and be a top three tight end again. I don't think he does. I think he's still very serviceable and a guy that you're definitely drafting as a top five tight end. But um, yeah, I think they're just with that offense, there's so many people. The way they like to play football too is it's not through their tight end. It's honestly starts with the run game and Gibbs and Montgomery, and then he's not even the alpha receiver with Amon Ra, and then obviously the deep ball Jamison Williams. So I think there's too many mouths to feed that in terms of this group, he's gonna have to be my cut.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, let me start off by saying this. I think that a lot of people currently are ranking there's that tier one is Bowers, McBride, and Kittle. I think there's a drop off. I think tier one is Bowers and McBride, and that's
I
it.
agree. I
I
agree.
think I agree with you. Kittle scored a lot of touchdowns last year, and it kind of reminds me of the season Laporta had the year prior.
Mhm.
I think Kittle had a lot more yards and everything, but Kittle became valuable last year because guys were going down with injury and the offense started evolving around him rather than it being, there's a ton of guys to pass around to.
Mhm.
I think he will be the primary target in the offense still. His production though has been down when McCaffrey's healthy. I thought like, oh, last year like it's gonna drop off significantly. McCaffrey's healthy. It really didn't. So
Mhm.
I think I'd start Kittle. I think it's just now with the receivers there looking different. Like IU, who knows when he's going to play again.
Mhm.
I think the receiving game is revolving around Kittle. So I think Kittle is still the guy, even with McCaffrey healthy. I think Kittle is still the guy. So I'd start Kittle. And the next two get really interesting because I think Hawkinson is a much better option for PPR, for
Mhm.
PPR leagues. I think he's going to get more targets. But I do actually want to bench Sam Laporta because I think he's going to kind of even out. I think it's going to be his season this year is going to be a lot more like what we saw towards the end of this past year for him.
Mhm.
He started off extremely slow amidst the Jamison Williams breakout year. And then towards the end of the year, he did great. He won me my fantasy league too. So Sam Laporta, he became really consistent. I think he had something like 7 catches and 50 yards and a touchdown, something like that. He had like 18 fantasy points in that last game of the fantasy season for me. So I think Laporta is just we know he can be the overall tight end one too, and knowing that and his finish as quote unquote a bad year being like the tight end eight last year, I think I still buy into who Laporta is and what he can be, and Goff's gonna still pass him. Dan Campbell is still the coach there, so no, it's not Ben Johnson, but maybe that means less trick plays to Jamison Williams down the sideline, and maybe that means more for Laporta. I think. Either way, both offenses, you have the number one wide receiver in Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Then you have the number two guy in Addison and Jameson Williams. And then it's the tight end, Hawkinson and Laporta. I think they're very similar offenses.
Mhm.
Just I'd personally trust the Lions more, even without Ben Johnson. I think I'd just trust Goff as a quarterback more. And I just want to see it from McCarthy before I say, oh, Hawkinson's going to be the guy and he's throwing it check downs to him all the time. But
Mhm.
I do agree it'll be a safety blanket for him. And it'll be interesting to see. I think all three of these guys are good picks, though. I think all three of these guys are going to be pretty nice picks for fantasy and tight ends. So you don't get one of those top two guys. I think these three are pretty nice to have on your roster.
Yeah, I just think it shows the riskiness of the tight end position because I mean we're talking about the 3, 4, and 5 at the position in terms of rankings, and we just kind of went down the list of that. None of these guys are, besides Kittle, maybe in terms of receiving, but none of them are the top offensive option on their team.
Mhm.
So I think
Yeah.
that kind of fact, and not for a couple of them, not even the top three, two or three, like 2 or 3 option on the
Hmm.
team. So I think that fact is just a little scary in terms of like how badly I want to go get a Bowers or McBride. And if I don't,
Yeah.
then I'm kind of fading the tight end position. So to kind of get one of these guys that, like some of these guys did, crawl into that top 10 and then become household names. So yeah, I think that kind of shows the riskiness of the position in general.
Yeah, I think just to go off that, right? Tight end 6, you got Evan Engram. Who knows what's going to happen there in
Mhm.
Denver? Tight end 7, you have Kelsey. Oh, is he getting too old? Tight end 9, Mark Andrews, same thing. Is he getting too old? The tight end 8, the guy we're going to talk about is Jonnu Smith. What do you make of him? He ended last season as a top 5 tight end.
Yeah.
So, what's the situation here? But I think you're right. A lot of these guys aren't the number 1 or 2 option on their team.
Hmm.
Jonnu Smith at tight end 8, I like a lot. I
Yeah.
think that's a value. I think we saw last year that offense started transforming, and Tyreek Hill was no longer the number 1 receiver on that team. And I think Jonnu Smith started becoming the number 1 receiver on that team. And for years, we've been saying, oh, Jonnu Smith, it's his breakout year. Oh, now he's out of Tennessee. He's in New England. It's his breakout year.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
nope. He's traded and now he's sitting behind Kyle Pitts, but somehow they're still using him. But it's Arthur Smith. And now he goes to Miami and he's actually breaking out. I think that the team relies on him. And if we want to talk about those number 1 and 2 options, yeah, we know Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle can be elite, but last year they were not, and Jonnu Smith was. And I think Jonnu Smith is a important piece to that offense, and he's a freak. He's an athletic freak. He's a great player. I think tight end 8's a little low. And I think more 6 right behind those guys we just talked about is probably where I'd be considering him.
Yeah, honestly, I think tight end 8 is right around where he should be, in my opinion. Honestly, 9, 10, even I'd be okay with, just because of that kind of inconsistency in his career. Uh, he had a very good year, but it's I think it's interesting because a lot of his success came without Tua, and I think in terms of how the Dolphins and Mike McDaniel run their offense, they had to kind of adapt. I think that's why we saw down years from Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle because Skylar Thompson and whoever else they had at quarterback aren't ripping the ball down the field. So it kind of played into John's hands where that's who's going to get the ball because he's kind of that check down option, that guy that's not stretching the field, and that guy that's kind of an easier target to for a quarterback of Skylar Thompson's capabilities is able to make that throw. So I think when we see Tua come back, I think we start to see his role diminish. And I know he had success with Tua towards the end of the year, but I think the Dolphins really try and get back to that offense of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle just dominating, and they at least they tried to. I'm not sure if that will be the case. And in that time period where both of them were having great years, top 10 finishes at the position, you didn't see Mike Gesicki putting up crazy numbers. And that was their tight end during that time. So that's what worries me a little bit, and that's why I feel like this is okay for his ADP, just because I don't think he recreates that last year's season. And last year's season wasn't where did he finish in terms of did you say in terms of like overall tight
I
ends?
know it was top 5. I want to say 4, but
Yeah.
I know he finished top 5.
Yeah. So I think this was just kind of one of those like, mirror I don't want to say miracle because like you said, he is a talented player. He kind of served a role on a lot of teams, but I think it was kind of one of those miracle seasons where like he has a really bad year this year, and it's kind of like, yeah, this is a guy that's gonna be cut at some point from your fantasy team. just because of that, I think the Dolphins try and go back to the way things won them football games. And when they were doing this with Jonnu Smith, it wasn't resulting in winning football games. It was resulting in very hard games to watch as a football fan and fantasy fan, unless you're a Jonnu Smith fan, which he dominated in this format of how the
Yeah.
Dolphins are running the offense. So I'm just a little worried about his ability and the Dolphins' overall plan offensively to keep him as a primary target.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I just don't think he's going away. Even if they do go back to it, I don't think he's going to. I think the biggest thing I've been struggling with. I'm talking myself into John Smith because I think he can be good. And the thing that's really keeping me away from him is that his name and his career has not shown that he's, this elite tight end. So why
Mm.
should we draft him as one? But
Yeah.
the production was there, and you watch his tape. He's a very good tight end. Like he's actually a good athlete utilized properly in prior schemes. I was so excited when the Patriots got him because they paid him a lot. I'm like, oh, they're going to use this guy and he's finally going to break out because the talent is there, and they
Yep.
didn't use him. So I think he's going to be an option there in Miami, even if Tyreek Hill and Waddle. And, even if it doesn't work out or Tua gets hurt again, well, now they have who I believe is an upgrade at the backup position in Zach Wilson. So
Hmm.
no, he's not the best player in the world, but it's something. I think I'd rather take him over guys like Mark Andrews, who's going right behind him, and even Travis Kelsey. What is Kelsey gonna do anymore? That receiver room's crowded. Worthy's on the come up. Rice is there. Evan Engram, even. We know Sean Payton likes his wild card, his Joker guys, and Engram can be that. There's nobody else there outside of Sutton. So he could
Yeah.
be just straight up the number two. So, but I don't know. I was actually just talking well about Ingram rather than typing up
Yeah.
Jonnu. But anyways, Jonnu, he's a wild card, but I think there's promise there.
Yeah. I mean, I just personally would rather get burned by like, kind of the at least one fantasy legend in Travis Kelsey and a very good fantasy player in Mark Andrews rather than like, one really good year of Jonnu Smith. If that, so that's just kind
Hmm.
of my take on it is that, hey, like if it's Kelsey and Andrews are done in that kind of prime era of tight ends that we kind of got to know these past 10 years for Kelsey and 5 for Andrews, then like so be it. But I don't want to get burned by Johnny Smith, at
Yeah.
least taken in like the seventh, eighth round. I'd rather just draft a guy later. But yeah, hey, I still agree with the talent, but um, yeah, I don't know. It's someone that, hey, I hope he works out for you. But I don't
Yeah.
think
Hey, I mean, that's fair. I mean, y'all who listen to this, you're gonna have to decide yourself too.
yeah,
Do you want the old guys who may have a steady floor, but not a lot of upside, or do you want Jonnu Smith and hope he's gonna break out again? So,
yeah,
you gotta make that decision when time comes. But we'll have more rankings and stuff. Eventually, we'll release our own rankings, and we'll have a lot more to talk about this summer. But we're gonna wrap it there for today. Next week, we'll probably talk about potentially some more rankings and things we've noticed there. But regardless, you'll have an episode next week, and we'll have some good stuff to talk about. Anything else, Vinny?
absolutely. No, that's it. Yeah, this was a fun episode to kind of
Yep.
look at some of these initial ADPs. And yeah, something to kind of like look back on as when we get closer to the year of wow, like Dak Prescott was the QB 15, now he's up to 10. Like people kind of caught on. So not saying that's going to
Hmm.
happen, but those are the kind of things you look at. And it's kind of fun to track. But yeah,
Absolutely. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. See you
all right,
next time.
peace.